Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hi, I'm Jason with Jason Pollock. I am not Jason. Join Jason and Justin back in the green room as they talk with some of their favorite folks from the entertainment industry. And now, the man you haven't been waiting for, Jason Pollock!
Hi, I'm Jason. Why do I call the show Hi, I'm Jason? Because nobody knows me, and now you do. I had a great interview last week with Steve Stoliar, author of Raised Eyebrows, My Years Inside Groucho's House. We jumped right into chatting, so won't you join us? This interview picks up when he's describing his meeting with Sid Caesar. And for more videos like this, please follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Enjoy.
Caesar threw in. But I got to meet him on the set, and I had an original still from the Admiral Broadway Review, which was even before Show of Shows. And I had him sign it, and he got a kick out of the fact that I just happened to show up with this original still from like 1949 or something.
That is so great.
It was just a brief path crossing, but I made the most of it, and it was great watching him work, even if it hit the cutting room floor.
Okay, it sounds like you've had really great positive experiences with these legends.
I have had really good luck. People have said, beware of meeting your heroes. And there are certainly lots of stories of people that it's like, I wish I'd never met him or her. I've had really good luck, good experiences with the people that I've admired, and have quite a roster of people from my pantheon of heroes that ended up not being a disappointment. Although, all right, Zeppo. The first time that I saw Groucho in person was in late 72 when he was touring in his one-man show, and he was at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. And my friend and I bought tickets, which were $9.50, which were a fortune then, which wouldn't pay for parking now, but back then it was a lot of money. And our seats weren't very good. We were way in the back of the auditorium, but I at least got to see my hero, Groucho, shuffle out, and he had slowed down, but there he was on the stage, and I thought, that is as close as I'll ever get to him. And then that evening, after the show, I was down in the parking garage, and I spotted Zeppo Marx looking for his car. He was with a young blonde, and I recognized him because I was such an obsessive Marx Brothers fan that I knew what he looked like now. And so I thought, well, I'm never going to meet Groucho, but I'm going to meet a Marx brother, damn it. So I went over and I just said, "Excuse me, Mr. Marx, I just wanted to let you know how much I've enjoyed you in your movies." And he said, "You weren't enjoying me, you were enjoying my brothers." And I thought, I'm so glad I took the time to connect with you. But
wow. I mean, it's true, but still.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I could have said, well, what am I supposed to say? You didn't add much to their movies, but once you left, we missed you. Because you at least were better than Kenny Baker in at the circus going, "Oh, gosh, we've got to save the circus, fellas."
You brought up Kenny Baker before Gummo, even.
Yes. Right. So, but then I ended up having a remarkable experience with Zeppo when I went to work for his brother a couple of years later. And I got to know Zeppo a little more, and he really was quite fun and had a great charisma, lit up the room when he walked in. You hear about that he had a great sense of humor, and people go, "Oh no, if you've seen Monkey Business, you see that he's just a stick in the mud." But it's kind of unfair because he never intended to be a performer, but he was, when the Army drafted Gummo to go into World War I and the brothers were in vaudeville, the brothers drafted Zeppo to take over the straight man role. And Zeppo was like 17 at the time. And, by then, Groucho and Harpo and Chico's characters were pretty solidified. And there really wasn't much for Gummo to do, consequently, not much for Zeppo to do, except be maybe the romantic lead and maybe sing a little bit. So when they did their Paramount films, Coconuts, Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup, those are the 5 that Zeppo was in. I think not coincidentally their best films before MGM started diluting them. But he was never really happy on that side of things. And he quit after Duck Soup and became an extremely successful agent, representing such forgotten bit players as Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, Barbara Stanwyck, Robert Taylor, Lana Turner, Lucille Ball.
Zeppo was her agent?
Yeah.
My wife has never told me this. She's my teacher and all this, but no.
Yeah, he was. It was a big agency, and a lot of people went to him, and he had a very good reputation for, fighting for a tough deal. Sometimes literally fighting. He had a bit of a reputation as a, he could get to be a fighter. And he also picked up where Chico left off in terms of gambling and womanizing. But
did Chico and Harpo pass on by the time you got to live?
Yeah, unfortunately, they died when I was a kid. They died in 61 and 64, so I never got to meet them. But I mean, I got to know 3 of the 5 Marx Brothers, which is not a bad batting average.
That's great.
Got to meet Gummo on a few occasions, and he was kind of quiet and amusing. The day I met him at Groucho's, I didn't have anything interesting for him to sign, so I just got an index card and asked him to autograph it to me. So he signed it and handed it back and pointed at his signature and said, "If that were on the bottom of a check, it might actually be worth something." So,
I got to ask you, how do you, the big question is, how did you end up moving in with Groucho?
Well, I didn't move in with him, although I was there on dot. And then towards the end, I was in charge of the household on weekends during a very acrimonious battle over Groucho between his son and Aaron Fleming, the younger actress who had slowly taken over being in charge of his life, with Groucho's permission. But she was a tough and mentally disturbed woman. And that was very stressful. I really don't know how I lasted as long as I did, because she hired and fired people. She would imagine plots against her. And then the one time there was a plot against her, she didn't fire me, even though I was part of it. Very hard to get a bead on her. But how did I get the job? Well, let me try to do a short version of this. Animal Crackers was their second film, and it had for years been stuck in legal limbo, basically because the copyright had expired through an oversight at Paramount, and the rights had reverted back to the people who wrote the Broadway version and the songs for it. And when Paramount sold their old films to Universal in the late 50s, Animal Crackers was in the package, but they couldn't release it or put it into rotation in syndication on TV unless they felt like spending the money to untangle the legal knot. And they thought, why should we do that? We've got all these other old movies. The hell with it. I, on the other hand, and all of my friends who were Marx Brothers fans, wanted desperately to see this film because it was, they only made about a dozen movies. They weren't like Laurel and Hardy or the Three Stooges, where they cranked out dozens and dozens of short films and feature films over many years. 1929 was Coconuts, and then A Night in Casablanca was 46, and then that one little Love Happy in 49, and that was it for their
A Night in
film.
Casablanca was a favorite. I've met quite a few people who've never heard of it.
Well, it wasn't a big studio. It was an independent film and doesn't tend to get in it doesn't tend to cycle through the way the MGM films or the Paramount films do.
The
But,
sword fighting scene was just wonderful.
it wouldn't have been a bad swan song if that had been it, and then they hadn't done Love Happy. But,
Oh yeah.
anyway, I started a committee at UCLA where I was attending school, a petition drive and a committee for the re-release of Animal Crackers. And we had our table set up, and there were all the other special interest groups: Hare Krishna, legalizing marijuana, ending the war, gay rights, rights for Iranians, and then this table of kids trying to get a Marx Brothers movie out. And I managed to get in touch with Erin Fleming, the aforementioned woman who was overseeing Groucho's life. And she arranged for him to come to UCLA and sit with me, surrounded by hundreds of eager students, plus all the networks and Entertainment Tonight, and all these reporters were there. And there I was, sitting side by side with my hero. I said, "Groucho, I'm very happy to be meeting you after all this time." And he said, "Well, you should be." and Erin said, "This is Steve Stoliar. He's the one who's trying to get Animal Crackers re-released." And Groucho said, "Well, did you get it?" And I said, "Not yet, but we're sure working on it." And he said, "You better, or I'll fire you." I said, I didn't realize I was working for you. How much are you paying me?" And he said, "A little less than nothing." And it was like, pinch me. Is this really happening? I couldn't believe that there we were talking, chatting, and my heart was pounding out of my shirt. I was so nervous. It's amazing that I made any sense at all. And then, I remember one reporter said, "Mr. Marx, what is the purpose of your visit here today?" And he said, "I expect to get lunch." And she said, "No, but besides that, I may get dinner." And another one said, "What do you think of all of the admiration you get from the young generation today?" And he said, "Well, I'm flattered by it. Last Halloween, 3 kids came to my door dressed as Groucho, Hoppo, and Chico." And I said, "What did you give them?" And he said, "I sent for the police." No. So, that mechanism that made him Groucho was still there, even though he had slowed down and had strokes. And the Universal relented, and they thought, "Fine, we'll do what it takes. We will release it in 2 theaters, one in Westwood for the UCLA crowd, and a Revival House in New York for that crowd, and then we don't want to hear about this anymore." And it ended up breaking the house record at the UA Westwood that had been set by the French Connection several years earlier. And I have to tell you how gratifying it was to be sitting in a coffee shop in Westwood and see a line all the way down the wall of the theater of kids in tennis shoes and jeans and T-shirts waiting to pay good money to see this old black and white Marx Brothers movie. And now...
So you're responsible for this.
Yeah. And it's really cool, on Facebook or emails or something, I'll hear from someone and they'll say, "Oh, the first Marx Brothers movie I saw was Animal Crackers on television." And I think, you don't know how much blood, sweat, and tears I shed just so you could say, "Oh, yeah, that was the first one I saw," because it was nowhere to be seen. It was the holy grail of Marx Brothers film. So that summer of '74, I had a couple of summer jobs fall through, which I'm now very glad they did. And my dad was saying, "I don't want you sitting on your fanny all summer. I want you to go down. There's a good good rich place may want someone to sell tires or Taco Bell. And I thought, I don't want to deal with that. So I called Aaron Fleming and said, is there anything at all that you think maybe kind of I might sort of be? And she said, well, actually, I had been Groucho's secretary, but things have gotten so busy. I'm his manager now, and we need someone who can handle all of the fan mail, which has gotten out of hand, and someone who really knows their Marx Brothers to put all of Groucho's memorabilia in some kind of order. It's going to be donated to the Smithsonian after he's. And I'm thinking, oh, please, 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 oh, please, 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 please. And in my mind's eye, like a Tex Avery cartoon, I see me standing on the front door of Groucho's house while she's still explaining the job to me over the phone at my parents' house in Tarzana. It wasn't quite like that, but it felt like that. And I thought I would be working in an office building on Wilshire Boulevard, and Groucho would come in once a month to sign checks or something. She said, oh, no, dear, there's a room you can use for your office, and you can come and go as you wish and make your own hours. And they paid me money to go to Groucho Marx's house and immerse myself ankle deep in photos from vaudeville of the brothers out of makeup, letters, scripts with Groucho's handwritten notations.
You were living the dream.
I was living the dream initially 7 days a week because it was during the summer, and I started on a Monday and worked through Saturday, and then figured I would rest on Sunday because, if it was good enough for God, I might as well rest on Sunday. And then I thought, why am I sitting here in the family house in Tarzana? I could be at Groucho Marx's. And I showered and put my clothes on and drove back, and it was like I couldn't get enough of it. I was so eager to connect with my hero. Anyone who's had an idol doesn't have to be a comedy guy, whether it's a sports figure or politician or a serious actress. Huh?
Yeah, musician.
Yeah, some rock legend. Imagine not just getting to meet them, but working at their house. And because it was a very even-handed household, I got to eat with Groucho in the dining room. It wasn't like the help ate in the kitchen. So I got to sit there no matter who was coming over for lunch, or even if no one was, then it was Groucho and Aaron and me, or Groucho and a nurse and me. And I was able to talk to him. I mean, all the questions I had, I could ask in a really comfortable atmosphere and listen to his stories about vaudeville and films and the people, because
it's incredible.
He was friends with George Gershwin and W.C. Fields and James Thurber and these mythic people. Plus, having been born in 1890, he was a literal Victorian, although he wasn't British, but Victoria was on the throne when, he was like, I guess he was 11 when she died. So he was born when Victoria, and his firsthand memories went from before the Wright brothers to after the moon landing and Neil Armstrong, which is just a staggering slice of history. And at the time, I was a history major and was always fascinated by archaeology and history and artifacts and all this. And this 19th century man, who also happens to be Groucho Marx, is sitting there and talking to me about, the night that President Harding died in 1923. Groucho said they were playing at a theater that had an aluminum roof, and it was raining that night, and nobody was in the mood to laugh. So during the whole show, all you heard was the pitter-patter of the raindrops hitting the aluminum roof. That's the kind of firsthand personal memory. One time I said, how far back can you remember? And he said, I guess the Spanish-American War, which was 1898. So it was just mind blowing, plus getting to meet and spend quality time with Jack Lemmon, Steve Allen, George Burns, Bob Hope, S.J. Perelman, Mae West, Dick Cavett. I mean,
So
and
was there anybody who came over where you just thought you you had to contain yourself, but you wanted to jump up and down like a little girl?
what is it with you and little girls? It reminds you of your mother-in-law. I remind you of a little girl. I think we need to talk about this during our next session. I was pretty good at self-containment, even though, I mean, when I say got used to it, again, I hasten to add, it never became matter of fact, but at least it wasn't, oh my God, oh my God. And what was cool was, I don't know if you've had the experience where you meet someone famous, but you're not really sure who they are. And then when you grow up, you go, oh, is that who that was? I wish I'd known at the time. I would have asked them this, and I didn't appreciate. In my case, because I was so obsessed with the Marx Brothers, I knew who all these people were especially like his writers and directors that were still around. So I got to meet Maury Riskind and Nat Perrin and Eddie Bazell and Irv Brecker and the staff of You Bet Your Life and George Fenneman. And I knew who and they appreciated the fact that a little whippersnapper like me knew who they were, and that we weren't all rock and roll, pot smoking, long haired hippies who didn't know who the older generation was. And also Groucho appreciated that I was into the stuff that he was into.
I'm sure.
One time he called me into his room and he peeled off a $20 bill and he said, run down to Tower Records and get me some records. You know what I like. And I thought, oh, how cool that he knows that I know, that he doesn't have to say, get me Irving Berlin or Gershwin or something. He knew I knew, and that was really gratifying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked. I mean, you're the first person. I've been comedies. So I meet a lot of people, but
Yeah.
you're the first person.
This is the 6 degrees of separation thing. And I realized that I became friends with Dick Cavett because of my Groucho connection. And he actually wrote the introduction to my book.
I saw that.
And we remain friends to this day. And I was talking to
right here.
Oh, hey, that's it there.
That's it. I see behind you.
Yes, it looks like there's real books behind me, but it's just, I could change this to the surf at Malibu or the Eiffel Tower. No, actually, I was doing a Zoom call and a friend of mine, and I said, Mike, what are you doing? He said, I'm trying to read the books behind you. I said, good news. You don't have to. I already did. I said to someone, between Groucho and Cavett, I'm probably 1 degree of separation away from every significant personage of the 20th century, because Cavett met all the political ones and literary ones, and Groucho knew all the Hollywood plus New York literary people and all that. And I really have had really extraordinary good fortune being able to meet, Fred Astaire.
I found this.
Hey, that's, believe it or not, the younger fellow on the left is me, impishly putting my 2 fingers behind Cavett's head on the set of a very short-lived series called HBO Magazine, which
I remember that.
82, 83. But that was a landmark moment for me because, as I mentioned, after Groucho died, I went to work at Universal as a production secretary. In 82, a call came from New York that Dick Cavett wanted me to write for him on this new show at HBO. And I moved to New York and spent an idyllic 2.5 years playing with Cavett and meeting more heroes, and just had a marvelous Manhattan experience before basically having to move back to LA because work was drying up there and I had an offer to work on a show out here. I didn't really want to come back. I loved New York. Um, anyway, now I've derailed my train.
That's just writing to have Dick Cavett, who's such an intellectual, ask you to write for him.
I know.
What a
And
treat.
but what was weird was, you know, when the plane took off at LAX, I was the secretary, and when it touched down at JFK, I was this writer from LA, because that's what the people at HBO had been told. Cavett said, "I want you to hire Steve Stoliar. He's at this phone number, and I think he'd be just right for the show." And they thought, "Oh, that's who Dick wants. I don't know who it is, and I don't know." So, and I thought, gee, this is the way my mind works when it does. I actually thought I could walk with a limp or have an accent, and no one there would think it was weird because they have nothing to compare it to. I was just this blank slate that arrived as this LA writer. And it really was a great experience just all the way. It didn't last long, but I did other things for him and for HBO, and it was really cool. But the connection with Cavett began when Groucho was sent an advance copy of Cavett's memoir called, of all things, Cavett. And he shuffled into my room at his house and he said, "Read this, you'll enjoy it." And at the time, I wasn't that big a fan of Cavett's. I had seen the show a number of times, but didn't make a point of staying up to watch it. But I thought I better read this because Groucho's going to ask, "What did you think of the book?" And I don't want to say, "Oh, I never got around to it." So I started reading it, and from the beginning, I just related to this guy, and I thought, "Oh man, this is a kindred spirit." If that we both from the Midwest, we both worshiped the classic comedians. We were both shy around girls. We both lost our mothers to cancer at an early age. I bet we'd do well, but he's this intellectual New York guy from Yale, and I'm this kid, in LA. And in the book, Cavett talks about the day he met Groucho, which was at George Kaufman's funeral, and that when they spent time together, Cavett, jotted down on a few scraps of paper key words to remind him of the stories Groucho told him. And in the book, he said, "Unfortunately, now I no longer remember what some of them mean." And he mentioned a couple of them. And I thought I might know what they were because of the time I spent with Groucho. So I stole his address out of Groucho's little black book and wrote him a letter and said, "I'm working for Groucho and I read these things. Here is what I think those stories might have been." And he wrote me back and it said, "Dear Steve, you were uncannily on the nose with your two guesses. Write again and I will answer again and better." And then we started this letter writing correspondence. And then when Groucho died, I thought, well, now that the pipeline into the Marx household with all the intrigue between Aaron and Arthur and how Groucho, now that has come to a close, he probably won't have much interest in staying in touch. And he called me from New York the week Groucho died. And he said, "Listen, I hope just because Groucho's gone, we're not going to lose touch. And by the way, I hope you don't mind, but I've shown some of your letters to Woody, and he says they're very well written." So I emptied the urine out of my shoes, and I finally met Cavett in person in '78 when I went to New York for a visit because a friend of mine was staying there, and it was he was doing his PBS show, and he tended to tape about a week's worth of shows in one sitting to get him out of the way. This had Gore Vidal and New Yorker cartoonists, including Charles Addams, which I knew ahead of time. So I got to meet Charles Addams and have him sign a book of his cartoons in the green room. And then afterwards, I was ushered into Cavett's dressing room where he was changing clothes. And I was nervous for about 28 seconds, and then it was like we went to junior high together, and it's been like that ever since. He's just a great guy. He's been like a big brother to me, not in an Orwellian sense. has done me all sorts of favors, and gets a kick out of my impressions.
Your impressions are dead on.
And Woody Allen gets a kick out of my impressions. He can't believe that I do like Burgess Meredith or Grady Sutton, or anyone can.
Who does a Grady Sutton impression? That's
Oh,
fantastic.
Mr. Southey, you made me buy a beefsteak, man. I should never have listened to you. Just leave me alone. Why don't you just? Yes, it's big demand. Bennett's Surf. I do the people that nobody else does because there's no competition.
I don't know if you know Roger Kabler. He's a comedian impressionist. He does a great Rich Little.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
that
good.
was a very original.
So many of Rich Little's impressions sound just like Rich Little.
Yes.
I'm a real stickler when it comes to impressionists. John Biner and Will Jordan were much more accurate than some of the better known. I mean, Little's probably the most famous impressionist, but I don't think, and his material's funny, but it's not the kind of thing where you would swear the guy's standing in front of you, whereas some of them are like that. But anyway.
First of all, I didn't know you worked on Sheriff Lobo. That was
Okay.
I didn't need to rehash that.
That's all right. I have a Christmas card signed by Claude Akins and Mills Watson, and who was the young blonde guy? Now, the fact that I could retrieve both of those names isn't bad. Yeah, I mean, working at Universal was cool too.
Yeah.
Because even though, I mean, I was initially in the steno pool every day from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. with a Selectric 2, typing Rockford Files, Kojak, Beretta, and parts of scripts to Animal House, and
you wrote for Animal House?
No, not wrote. Typed.
Oh.
They would come up with scribbled, typed on a manual typewriter or something.
You typed up the actual script.
Get sent to the print shop to be duplicated, and so a lot of the people in steno, to them it was just you punch in and you punch out. I took it as a ticket to this wonderland. I was always wandering all over on my lunch hour. It's like the Phantom of the Opera stage from the Cheney Senior Phantom was still there with the balcony overlooking the stage. I mean, famous. And then I would try to keep track of who was appearing as guest stars. I didn't really care about the current stars at the time. I didn't care about Lindsay Wagner and Robert Blake and Lee Majors, but they got guest stars on, and that's what jazzed me. So I got to meet Lauren Bacall on the set of the Rockford Files. I got to meet, here's a real When Worlds Collide thing. I met Fred Astaire on the set of Battlestar Galactica in 1970.
I loved that show, but I don't remember Fred. I think I might have been too young to remember Fred Astaire being on that show.
His grandson, his daughter Ava had a son, and that was his favorite show. And he said, "Grandpa, will you be on that show?" And Astaire thought, well, I can't deny my own grandchild. So he got in touch with them, and he was cast as Dirk Benedict's con man father. And so I went down to the set and had him sign a photo from Swing Time and said, thank you for all of the wonderful moments between flying down to Rio and a family upside down, everything in between. And he said, oh my goodness, thank you. Family Upside Down was a TV movie he had just done with Helen Hayes. So that was his most recent credit.
Wow, your life is behind the scenes at TCM. You're the first person I've met who's met everybody who's on our TVs in this house, anyway.
And Katharine Hepburn. I had borscht in her kitchen.
You had borscht in Katharine Hepburn's kitchen? After Groucho,
I met Mae West at Groucho's house. I mean, a night, imagine sitting in the living room and watching Mae West leaning against the piano, reciting a bawdy song while Harpo's son Bill is playing a honky-tonk version of Frankie and Johnny, and Groucho is saying provocative things to Mae West. How did I luck into this? I don't know. My life has had some big-time awful traumas, so it isn't as if it's just been a hot knife and butter prancing through my days and years. But I have had and appreciate and never take for granted the experiences I've had.
That's wonderful. I love that you shared these stories.
Well, what good are they if I can't share them with someone who gets it and doesn't say, when Raised Eyebrows came out, the first edition came out in hardcover in '96, and the publicist at the publisher would just call me up and say, I've arranged for you to be on a drive time radio station in Nashville, and they'll call you their time, so you have to be ready at 4:05 a.m. And I would just set my alarm because it's like, I don't care, I'll talk about my book wherever. And I remember this one, and so consequently the people that interviewed me weren't people that had read my book or were big Marx Brothers fans or were happy to have me. It was just like they'd get a list of people that were available to talk to about their diet book or whatever they've written, you know. And I remember one DJ said, which was the brother that played the harp? And he was serious. And I wanted to say, wow, take a wild guess, asswipe. But my cooler head prevailed, and I carefully explained why it would have been Harpo who played the harp. That's the kind of thing I was dealing with. So it's a pleasure to talk with someone that can appreciate these experiences I had many years ago with people who are off a lot of people's radar now, as we previously discussed earlier in our lecture, boys and girls.
It's true. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm so overwhelmed by your stories and your past that I forgot that I'm doing an interview, and you
That's good.
Talking, I got to ask a question.
You don't have your producer going.
Yes, my filter's gone. But don't worry, I'm not going to say anything provocative to you.
If you haven't by now, it's unlikely you're going to.
Thank you.
And now my book is being developed as a motion picture, which blows what's left of my mind, because that means there will be someone playing a 20-year-old Steve Stoliar with mutton chops and hair and a mustache. And
now, do you have someone in mind who you would cast to play you?
No, I don't, because I don't really know who the 20-year-old performers are. But I made it
clear, I don't either.
And I made it clear to I can't really talk about who's involved with it, but the director and the co-writer, I wrote my own adaptation and then it was co-written. I made it clear, and at least they agreed, that it shouldn't be some young hunk. It shouldn't be some guy with dreamy eyes and high cheekbones, because you had to believe that he would much rather sit in a dark room and watch old movies and meet people in their 80s than get smashed at keggers at frat houses and try to nail sorority chicks. So he needed to be more average than hunky. And I think they have someone in mind. He doesn't really look much like me, but I don't see what difference it makes, because 11 people in the world, you know, I haven't even gotten into this, and there isn't time, but I'm also friends with Woody Allen, and I got to spend time with him when he was out here on the set of Cafe Society. And he was asking about how the movie's coming along, and we were talking about casting. And he said, and you, nobody knows what you look like. You could get Orlando Bloom to play you. So it's not going to be Orlando Bloom. Because hey, there we are. I felt like I was posing next to a prized marlin that it took me years to land. That was in Groucho's backyard in November of '74. And I was so excited to have that visual proof and in color.
Yeah, and
It goes a
if anyone watching this has an actor in mind, please let us know.
Oh, don't tell them that, or you'll get inundated. No, we have someone that's seriously under consideration, and again, I can't discuss it, but so don't do that. But but if you are interested, my book is available in Kindle and audiobook with me doing all the voices on Amazon. And if you would like to get a signed, hey, there it is, a signed copy of my book, you can order one from stevestoliar.com, STEVESTOLIAR, yes. And I would be happy to sign it and personalize it however you wish. And that is my shameless plug amidst all of my delightful tales of Hollywood behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen.
And it's a must-do. I hate promoting myself, but you got to do it.
I'm sure I would have been much more successful if I had that shark-like thing. If I was one of those, Mr. Spielberg, I have this script in my trunk, but I can't. I tend to hang out with people that I like to hang out with, not because they're advantageous to know. And I know
they're interesting. They entertain you. They keep you.
Oh yeah, or they get me, or they're just enjoyable to be with. Not because think what he could do for you, or he can get. It's like if that happens, that's fine, but that's not the central thing. And
exactly.
I'm an unhappy fellow, so I'm going to keep doing that no matter what you say.
Good. And remember, if you're watching, stevestoliar.com, scrolling right here on the bottom.
Hey. Don't you have the news down there?
That is the news. As far as I'm concerned, this is all that's going on in the world right now.
If only. If only.
I have a picture I would like to ask you to explain.
Is it of me?
I think you are in this.
That is, how can I do this quickly? Groucho wrote a book in 1930 called Beds. And in it were different pictures of Groucho in bed and around beds. And then in 1976, we decided to reissue it with an update and new photos not nude photos, new photos. And this was one of them that unfortunately wasn't used, but I was smart enough to get a copy of it for myself. He's in bed with Robin Heaney, who was his cook. And then behind him are one of his nurses, Barbara, and then the guy in the plaid shirt is Tom Wilhite, who was Groucho's publicity agent and later became a very big deal at Walt Disney Studios. Then there's me with my raised eyebrow gazing on Groucho and Robin, and the kid was the nurse's son. And then behind him, the balding guy was Groucho's biographer, Hector Arce. And you can barely see, watching over everything behind my head, Aaron Fleming, gazing upon.
I was going to ask you if that was him.
Lightly controlling everything. And it was because Hector felt he looked too fat. And so he said, I don't want the book to have that picture. And I was so pissed because I thought everybody's going to get such a kick out of this to open up this book and say, look, it's me. But at least I have the picture, and now you've asked me about it, and so there.
I saw it online and thought, I that's such a great shot.
I know. Well, I understand. We don't like pictures of ourselves not looking our best.
So are you retired now? Are you still writing?
If I'm retired, it isn't my choice. Well, in addition to co-exec producing and co-writing the film version of my book, I'm finishing up another book, which is a completely different kind of thing. But I've edited the wartime letters that my dad sent my mom while he was fighting the Nazis in World War II. And they vowed to write each other every day and came very close to it. And none of them are one page. So I had to input all of these like 500 letters of maybe 2,000 pages into a huge Word file so that I could then begin going through it and editing it. But it's a remarkable treasure trove, and he was a much better writer than I thought he was. And it's just this granular look at what it was like to be a GI in North Africa and France and Germany and Italy during World War II. Attending a Bob Hope show. He had he brought his dog Nancy with him to a Bob Hope USO show in Darmstadt, Germany. And while a tap dancer was tapping, Nancy leapt out of my dad's arms and across the stage, which scared the tap dancer. She stopped, and Bob Hope came out and he said, "You better get hold of that. If Crosby sees that dog, he's going to throw a saddle over it." Because Crosby was investing in racehorses, and a dog was a nickname for a worthless racehorse. So I met Hope a few times, but I met him for the last time at his house when I went with Dick Cavett to interview him for one of Cavett's shows. And during a break in taping, I told him the story about my dad's dog in World War II and what Hope said about, "You better grab that before Crosby throws the saddle." And Hope chuckled and he said, "Did I say that? Is that what I said?" And it was absolutely surreal to be able to tell him this thing that happened 50 years earlier in Germany back to the guy that said it to my dad. Anyway, so
That's beautiful.
That's what I'm working on.
Congratulations on everything. Oh, just a great life. And
if you can like what you do, then you win. You know, my dad grew up at a time when you got a job to keep food on the table and a roof over your head, and whether you enjoyed it or not was completely incidental and frankly kind of self-indulgent to look for a job that you wanted to do. But I seem to have stumbled into this. It wasn't like a lifelong dream, but between writing and doing some voiceover for radio and cartoons, although I'd like to do more.
You've got a great voice for that. I hear a little Jack Benny in there too.
Now, wait a minute. I met him briefly. Burns was great. Burns came over to lunch at Groucho's, and I was nervous. The doorbell rang, and I opened it, and he looked up at me and said, "Hi, you want to live a long time? Become an actor. You live to be an old man like Groucho." Okay, let's do it. And he shuffled off into the dining room. So, yeah, I mean, all these stories are in the book. I mean, the ones that were Groucho-centric, the other ones, yes, perhaps for a future volume. I don't know. People have said you've got all these other stories, and I guess. Oh, yeah. So.
The next time we got to do the Netflix documentary. He'll come to your house with a camera, tell us what you'll need. If it's Netflix, you'll need a twist at the end. Like
that's when I'll reveal that I am in fact a female, as you suspect earlier in our conversation.
Circumstantial.
Yes. Well, sir, have we reached the end of a broadcast?
We have reached the end. I want to share one thing with you because you reminded me when you told the story about being able to tell Bob Hope a story of your parents.
Yes.
My grandmother used to babysit Neil Sedaka.
Oh, wow.
And helped him get his thing out of his zipper. And I want to... I'm dying to ask him if he remembers my grandmother as his babysitter.
You know, in a few years, he'll probably be in need of someone to do that again. My sister Patty has friendships that just really go back many decades. And a few years ago, a friend of hers who used to live on our block in St. Louis, where I was born, she said, "I used to change your diaper, Steve." And I said, "Stick around. I may need you again in years to come."
We got to end on that note.
All right.
That was beautiful. Steve, come back anytime. You are a delight. And remember, I love your stories. I could listen to your stories all day long.
Well, you listen to them. I'm going to go feed my cat.
Love it. And don't forget, buy the book, Raised Eyebrows. Steve, thank you again.
My pleasure, Jason. Thanks for getting it.
Oh, I get it. Take care of yourself.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.